And now having an environment where you can actually like put on your own race, go race it, understand those tactics, experiment, and just, try different things and really start to build that other part of the knowledge of what it means to compete that is so critically important and is really that difference between, success and placing within a race.
All these decisions are what make bike racing interesting. It's not about sitting on a trainer and just spinning at a constant power for 40 minutes or so, and then whoever's got the biggest sprint wins. It's about who's got the best brain, who can deploy their skills, their physiology in the best way to get the best results.
Welcome to the TrainingPeaks Coachcast. I'm your host, Dirk. In each episode, we'll sit down with industry experts to discuss coaching methodologies, the latest research, and leading tools for endurance training. Visit trainingpeaks.com for more training and coaching resources. Welcome to a special episode of the Coachcast. If you haven't heard, TrainingPeaks acquired the virtual indoor cycling app indieVelo, which is now called TrainingPeaks Virtual. This new app is now available on most platforms, including Apple TV. TrainingPeaks Virtual is connected with your primary TrainingPeaks athlete account with the same login. Any structured workouts within your TrainingPeaks account automatically sync to TrainingPeaks Virtual, and completed workouts are sent back to your TrainingPeaks athlete account. On the show today, we have TrainingPeaks President Lee Gerakos and the founder of indieVelo and TrainingPeaks VP of Virtual Platforms, George Gilbert. This is a great conversation, which dives into why the companies came together and what new offerings it brings to TrainingPeaks coaches and athletes. Hey everyone, welcome to a very special episode of the Coachcast. Super excited today to have some really special guests. We have TrainingPeaks President Lee Gerakos, and we have the newest employee at TrainingPeaks, VP of Virtual Platforms, George Gilbert, and the founder of indieVelo. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you so much, Dirk. Great to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm super excited to talk about the launch of TrainingPeaks Virtual, of course. But first, let's have the listeners hear a little bit more about you guys. And Lee, how about yourself? You been riding a bunch inside these days?
I have. Not just these days, but for a very long period of time. And it has changed so much over the years. So first off, I just wanted to say that I'm thrilled to be here with both of you. It's really great to be in both of your presence and getting to work with you both. I have two founders that I've just been able to build these great relationships with. And I have just been so impressed, enamored, and just overjoyed with how much you have both brought to the sport and how you've impacted my life personally. And I'm just thrilled about this journey that I get to be on with you. I feel very privileged about it. So I just want to start there.
Reciprocal. You're making a big impact on me now. So I'm so happy to have you in the building.
I appreciate it.
And you've been a customer for a long time.
Yes, exactly. Right. So I've been here for a few years now, but I've been using TrainingPeaks since 2002. And as I've told you before, I still remember even before that, the first time I logged into Training Bible. And so, I've been experienced with this platform forever, have been a really, loving customer of the product. And I cannot even tell you how much it's impacted my life without even just being here. As you said, I've been using it since 2002. I did not grow up in a family that was really focused on athletics and sports. So this was all new to me. I came out to Colorado for a 6-month internship and just was amazed by the lifestyle and the lives that people led out here and how active everyone was, and got sucked right into cycling. And I still remember the first time that I went out on a group ride and just got immediately dropped and was like, I need to figure this out. And very quickly on, I went to Boulder Center for Sports Medicine, and I worked with a coach there. You might know him, Neil Henderson. And he was the first person who kind of gave me a program. And I still remember that first threshold test. It was, to figure out, this is all heart rate based. It was go right up Flagstaff as hard as you can. And so I just, was like a shot out of a cannon up the hill. And I was just way over my limit immediately. And I remember going back to him and he's like, yeah, that's not how you do this at all. right? Like it's like you got to pace yourself. You got to figure out how to moderate that effort for that duration. And it was really that first insight into what coaching meant, of not just the programming and the prescription, but also that feedback loop. And it's really, been a journey for me working with wonderful coaches throughout the year that really kind of changed my whole life, my lifestyle, what I thought I would be doing at this point in my life. And when it comes to indoor training, obviously, like, so much has changed since those days where, we talk about, watching those VHS tapes on the indoor trainer and the rollers and just, that being just a very kind of steady state experience, if you will, to where we are today with TrainingPeaks Virtual, and just how George has just done this unreal job of bringing the feeling of real cycling to indoors in such a true fashion. I've never experienced anything quite like it. There's this kind of like subtle experience when you're riding, which I'm sure, Dirk, you've also seen, to where it just feels different and it feels really amazing. And I can't give you enough credit, George, in terms of what you've developed there.
Thank you.
Yeah, talk about living, breathing the product for sure, George. Tell us about your background. How did you come to the world of cycling?
Yeah, so I've kind of spent the last 25 years effectively having two completely parallel careers, one in sport and one in technology. In sport, I was terrible at school sports. I'm really truly awful. The stereotypical last to be picked, no hand-eye coordination whatsoever. But I found that bluntly, when I was sitting down on my equipment and didn't have to do the whole hand-eye coordination, I was quite good at that. And then kind of went on and ended up as an elite athlete, competed internationally in cycling, running, and rowing. That kind of came to an end rather abruptly. I was diagnosed with a really serious medical condition that required open heart surgery, but got so much out of sport when I was younger that I felt this kind of real burning desire to put stuff back in, to kind of help the next generation through, to really get the benefits that I got as a kid, and how I could help them. So I kind of started off in sports administration, event organizer, local volunteer at bike races, commissaire, and worked my way through the system over at least a decade, 15 years or so doing that. Ended up as the vice chairman of the board of directors at British Cycling. I organised one of the test events ahead of the London Olympic Games in 2012. And was chief official for the UCI at a few world championships as well. This was all kind of like, this was for fun. that was kind of my hobby.
You have high standards.
Exactly. And in parallel to that, there was kind of my day job was actually in technology, spending 25 years building hardcore server code, working for Microsoft. Building the technology and systems that now run the global telephone network, that handle all of the world's 911 calls, that sort of thing. And then in my spare time, building kind of moderately successful computer games as a solo indie developer for fun. So with a background like that, it won't really surprise you that indoor cycling was suddenly really interesting to me, not only from an athletic personal perspective, but from the technology perspective. And it was a kind of natural career progression for me to combine those two things, that sporting side and the technology side, and start to really look at that intersection where sport and technology meet.
Yeah. Wow. So you just decided, what was that founder story of, developing indieVelo from the beginning? What was the purpose of it?
Yeah, so about that time when it was occurring to me, hey, I should, instead of doing two things in parallel, let's do them together. Indoor cycling was really starting to get some big players interested. The UCI were looking at holding their first world championships. The IOC were making noises about it being included in the Olympics. And I was kind of looking around and saw that the products on the market just weren't designed for that. And don't get me wrong, they're great for messing about and having fun, but they're not really got the accuracy needed to hold an Olympic Games. And combined with that, there's this almost feeling that it just wasn't bike racing. It was very much about who's got the biggest legs, who's the strongest, not what we all love about racing bikes, which is the tactics, the decision making. It's who's got the best brain as well as who's kind of, the fittest, the strongest, and so on. And so this idea of, if we want to have bike racing, indoor bike racing, as a serious, credible sport at the Olympic Games, what would that actually look like? What kind of accuracy would we need? What kind of precision would we need? What sort of tactics would people want to bring to the table? What skills would they need? And then my kind of technology brain was also looking at it and going, well, this is going to need a whole bunch of auditing as well. What about the supportability of this, the scalability of it, the performance verification side of it? How do we prevent people cheating? How do we make sure that it's commissarable? Not sure that's a word, but you know what I mean. The ability to kick riders out in real time, the ability to penalize people, all these kind of things. But my personality type is very much not let's moan at the sidelines. So I looked at this problem and went, right, let's go build it then.
Unreal.
Yeah, well, you're known for doing a lot of releases, so yeah, we thank you we saw all the progress along the way, and certainly we took notice. So, Lee, why was it such a natural kind of like fit? I mean, for some people this was out of left field, but why did you feel that this was such a natural fit to kind of bring in indieVelo, now TrainingPeaks Virtual, into our product offering?
Yep. I think there's two main reasons that we've kind of touched on a little bit here. One is that we've been doing this for a while. And I think that as we have grown with the sport and technology, all of these things have been one additional thing that we've come to experience, come to understand how to integrate. What is important as we think about growing the sport, getting more people to be able to live all the benefits that we do as participants in such a wonderful ecosystem of athletics, is how do we make that easier for people to come into it? And I think what we see with our athletes, with our coached athletes, and for our coaches, is that initial experience of how do I get set up? How do I get started? How do I get into this world of training? There's quite a bit of complication from that athlete's first time encounter perspective. And so how do we make that easier for that first person coming into that experience such that they can get the program, get set up, get on the trainer, and just start riding and start training and start racing, and then start to realize the benefits from which that can further expand. Secondly, it really comes down to what George just talked about with that seriousness and that focus on performance, on racing, on credibility, of how do we have a platform to which you can both train and race. And honestly, a lot of times racing is training too, but something that really is seamlessly, goes between indoors and outdoors. What we've always talked about at TrainingPeaks is two things. And Dirk, you actually mentioned this in, I think, one of our first meetings when we were working together, is first the importance of an open ecosystem. How do we make sure that people can ride where they want, when they want, how they want, and how do we help to facilitate that, right? So that is obviously a core principle and concern for us. The other aspect of it is, we really focus on those athletes and those coaches who are working with someone who is committed and is taking that training seriously. And so for what George has developed, it has really been focused around that serious, committed athlete who wants that realism, who understands that, yes, racing is more than just the fitness itself. Obviously, it's an incredibly important component, but understanding tactics, understanding, how your environment influences your decisions, whether it's your draft, the uphill finish, how you are operating fluidly within the pack, bringing that together it's so in line with who our core customer is. So that is it from that customer perspective. And I think, one important thing is when we talk about our values and how that comes through within our products and our people is, we have 3 core values: deliberate, impactful, and human. And I think what George just described was very deliberate in terms of how he is thinking about, what is the gap? What is missing within the industry? What is missing within that product space that needs to be filled such that we can continue to advance sport forward and help bring more people into it? And also continue to help legitimize the indoor racing and the esports aspect of the platforms that are out there today. Secondly is impact, right? So how are we thinking about creating greater and greater impact? George has done this as an individual, right? Like with his work with British Cycling, in his work with the UCI, in developing this platform. And then finally, human, right? So George, I think, you personify these values at the highest level. And it's just so great to have you as part of our organization because you have really helped foster, build, and facilitate a community that we are seeing every day with people who engage with the platform. And, it's really been great to see these last few weeks come together because there are so many people who are so happy for you, so excited for you, cheering for you, and so happy to see this continue to progress forward in a meaningful way. And so for us, it solved a problem. But when you think about bringing in a company and an acquisition and a platform, you really have to think through the people, the technology, and the business. And it was just check boxes all the way at the highest level. So
yeah, definitely. George, what kind of attracted you towards TrainingPeaks, and why do you think it was a good fit?
It can be basically summarized by one word: credibility. It's that trusted brand. Whilst up until now, I've been kind of doing this all on my own. One person sitting out of their spare bedroom typing code isn't going to, change the world. We can't get to the Olympics as a single person. I tried hard, but there's a limit. It was always the case that I was going to need to partner with somebody at some point. And so it's a question of looking around, looking for somebody with the same values, the same mission, the same purpose, that kind of core principle of creating software for committed athletes and coaches. And exactly as Lee's just said, who better than TrainingPeaks that personifies exactly what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and Lee, you mentioned, coaches, and we've always had, community. Coaches create their own communities, and they create they bring on the athletes, they teach them from day one, how to do, et cetera, all the different things we have to learn as a cyclist, triathlete, runner, or whatever it might be. How might indieVelo community or TrainingPeaks Virtual add to that community sense?
Well, and I think you really hit at the heart of it, right? Like the coaches are the heart of our sport, right? Like all the knowledge that we have, directly or indirectly, it comes from all of that sharing that has occurred. Every time I see someone talk about that coach-athlete experience, there is so much emotion and connection to it because coaches have profound impact on people's lives. And when we listen to all the other podcasts that are out there and all the other content, right, like it is largely coming from coaches who are sharing their wisdom and knowledge and helping us all improve. And TrainingPeaks, from its origins with the work that you started, Dirk, was really centered around that. How can we help coaches to help maximize their potential to impact the lives of those athletes to be their best? And in doing so, they build human connection and they foster community. within TrainingPeaks Virtual, as we now have it referred to, this is a great opportunity for coaches to engage even further with their athletes, both in terms of how we can continue to evolve the product in that seamless integration between the two environments, but also how coaches can engage directly within the platform today. From the ground up, George has been thinking about these things in terms of how does he enable and foster community within the platform. That's what honestly made it so compelling, right? Like we're seeing coaches already creating their team kits and bringing them into the product in the virtual environment, to creating their teams, to hosting group rides, to really starting to have this great opportunity to have that greater connection and to foster that community. And that's what has made this always so much fun, right? Like obviously performance has always been a critical aspect of it, but it's so fun to get together with other people and enjoy this experience together. And TrainingPeaks Virtual now has done such a great job in terms of how does it just support that from the ground up and scale.
Yeah, George, you definitely built, if you will, this open concept of create your own private public group rides, races, race series. You just literally opened it up to anybody create races on the fly. So, tell us more about that. How easy is it? Anyone can create group rides, public, private. A little more details on some of those features.
Yeah, definitely. And as you say, that kind of one of the underlying principles when I was kind of thinking about how all this should fit together is that it should be as open as possible. It should be that an athlete or a coach can just create their own events at any time. They should be able to come along and say, okay, well, I would like to put on a group ride and I would like it at this time and I'd like it on this course with these conditions. Maybe with a kind of a certain number of bots, or maybe whether it's with humans, or maybe it's kind of restricted in some way with kind of really high performance verification requirements, or maybe it's open to everybody. But the point is that there's choice. It should be your event done your way, when you want, however you want it. It's not for me as a platform operator to be able to dictate down how to use it. The philosophy was very much about how can we open this up so that people can use it as they like. And as you say, maybe some people will want their events open and use them to kind of promote themselves, promote their own maybe coaching business, have kind of open rides where people can come in, they can brand the world in their own branding, wear their own team kit, have their own kind of roadside banners and all this kind of stuff. Or maybe you want to do it in private. Maybe you want to just be able to put on an event for your team and nobody else to even know about it. It doesn't appear on any rosters. It doesn't appear anywhere else, that no results are published, but you and your private coaching group can do your racing or training or group riding exactly how you want it.
Yeah, and Lee, we definitely see some early adopter coaches launching new services, new group rides, new race series. That's pretty exciting stuff to see already.
Yes, absolutely. And again, it goes back to that openness that George just described, and just how easy it is for someone to go in and be able to determine, how do I want to experience this, both from an athlete and a coach standpoint. And so it's really just been great to see how excited our coaches have been for that, and how their athletes have been excited for this as well.
Yeah, George, you have some pretty darn amazing physics engine running behind the scenes there. And how is it unique in some ways in terms of, all the different physics that are going on? Yeah, what were some of the uniqueness that you built into the system?
Yeah, so the kind of the cornerstone of this from a philosophical perspective was the phrase tactically interesting racing. As we were talking about earlier, one of the things that makes real life bike racing great is that it's not the strongest person who wins. You look at a bike rider like, I don't know, Mark Cavendish or somebody. He's not the strongest rider in the field. He hasn't got the biggest legs. He's not the fittest, but he wins a lot. And the reason why he wins a lot is because he's tactically aware of what's going. He positions himself in the right place at the right time, conserves his energy throughout the race, and then deploys it at the right point. It's that sense of skill as a bike rider coming through. So that was the kind of the philosophy of how this should work. And then building that into the engine, building that into the physics engine, that kind of manifests itself in things like cornering. So as you come into a corner when you're riding TrainingPeaks Virtual, you have to slow down, you have to stop pedaling, and then re-accelerate out of the corner again, because that's what it's like in real life bike racing. Your legs hurt. You don't pedal at a constant speed. It's the acceleration and de-acceleration and then re-acceleration. That's what really stuffs your legs up when you're racing, isn't it? And getting that experience such that the tactically aware bike riders get the advantage, such that your skills as a bike rider matter. It's other things as well. It's your decision making. So maybe you're going into a headwind and you choose to attack, or maybe you choose to not attack, or you choose to chase down a group ahead or not, or you sit in. But all these decisions are what make bike racing interesting. It's not about sitting on a trainer and just spinning at a constant power for 40 minutes or so, and then whoever's got the biggest sprint wins. It's about who's got the best brain, who can deploy their skills, their physiology in the best way to get the best results. And I appreciate that all of that was very much as from a racing perspective. But it's also true from a training perspective as well. As we were saying, that in real life, bike racing isn't a constant speed, unless it's time trialing, obviously. But if you're on the road or mountain biking or whatever else, then it's about accelerating and de-accelerating. It's about the damage that you're doing to your legs by going over the limit and then coming back under repeatedly. And having that replicated indoors when you're kind of doing your practice racing indoors means that it's a huge benefit to you when you're outdoor racing as well.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also tactics in time trialing. It's not just constant. There are hills, there is wind. Should you go the same in the tailwind as a headwind versus an uphill and a downhill, right? So certainly there's tactics within time trialing as well. And what I love in TrainingPeaks Virtual is you have to think ahead. You have to kind of know the course and look ahead. You know the wind direction, and are we going to turn right or left? What's that going to mean in terms of wind direction? Where am I positioned in the group? If I want to attack, should I attack in the tailwind or the headwind? Those are things you have to think through. Yep. So that race simulation and training is definitely key. And it's really good. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with what you're saying there, Dirk, because I just think back to, again, when a platform like TrainingPeaks Virtual didn't exist, and you have maybe your weekend races. If you're lucky, you have a midweek race, and you missed those moves in that moment, and you don't understand necessarily like the strategy of what all is involved. Again, as a person who is learning this sport as an adult, and I would just like dwell on those concepts throughout the week. And now having an environment where you can actually like put on your own race, go race it, understand those tactics, experiment, and just, try different things and really start to build that other part of the knowledge of what it means to compete that is so critically important, and is really that difference between, success and within placing within a race. So it's really great to be able to simulate that.
That placing also applies not just to the finish results, but also in terms of kind of bunch positioning. So when you're in the peloton, one of the things that TrainingPeaks Virtual does uniquely is model everybody as solid bike riders. You can't pass through each other. So you have to go round each other. So if you're at the back of the bunch when the time comes for a sprint, you're not going to win this, no matter how strong you are. You've got to kind of make sure that you're at the front of the bunch before you can launch your sprint. So that kind of, as you were saying earlier, that thinking ahead, you can't just get to the last minute of the race and go for it. You've got to be positioning yourself from 4 or 5 kilometers out from the finish to make sure that you're in the best position such that you can get the best result at the end. And again, that kind of concept of transferable skills, that this thinking while you're right on the raggedy edge is a really important part of what makes a great bike racer.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of racing as well, you put a lot of time into, I hate bringing up cheating, but cheating isn't always cheating, as you've mentioned as well. You might be new, you didn't calibrate your trainer, and so there's an outlier going on. You kind of think through this. And so walk us through how you go about looking for outliers or cheats or non-cheats, if you will, within the racing program.
Yeah, I think the phrase that sums it up best is undue advantage. It's where somebody is going faster than they should. And some of the time, yes, people will be outright cheating. But the vast majority of the time, actually, it's people who've just got miscalibrated equipment or something like that. They haven't set it up correctly, or they haven't done something as part of their setup which will enable them to have accurate results, and their speed in game isn't a accurate reflection of what they would do in real life. And it's that difference between anti-cheating and making sure that everybody is going at a speed in game that represents what they can actually do in real life. And that kind of performance verification is built into the DNA of TrainingPeaks Virtual. I like to think of it a lot like security, actually. If you think about it, if you want to build, say, a bank safe or something, you don't get a wooden box and go, right, I'm going to put a lock on this. Just adding something afterwards doesn't work. You've got to design it in right from the very, very start. Otherwise, you end up with a system where you've got kind of ways around it. As I say, like with the bank vault, it's got to be designed from day one to be secure. And in the same way, that kind of performance verification, the way that the TrainingPeaks Virtual is constantly checking riders for their anomalies in the data. And every few seconds, it's constantly sampling people's data, looking at how they're doing compared to absolute standards, to relative standards, looking how their data compares between different sources. How's their power compared to heart rate? Is it coupled? Is it decoupled? How's it changing? All these kind of subtle signs around, is this person's performance legitimate? Does it look plausible? Does it look like this is an actual person doing what they can do outdoors, replicating it indoors? Or is this person gaining some sort of advantage that is, as I say, undue? Not necessarily cheating, but in order to have credible results of events, you need to make sure that everybody is performing on a level playing field. Everybody has that opportunity to perform at their best for them and no better than that.
Lee, do you have some?
Yeah, George, I was just curious too, because you're talking about, obviously, like that sounds like a very serious competitive aspect of the sport where there's a lot of, as you said, right, like credibility built into that racing. Are there other kind of forms of racing available within TrainingPeaks Virtual for that person who is more of that like recreational rider, or, just coming into racing to get that experience without, being concerned around like all of those additional complexities maybe?
Oh, absolutely. So, built into TrainingPeaks Virtual is this concept of tiers of performance verification. So, at the very base layer, you've got things like group rides, or maybe you're just doing a workout, or just training, or just riding around on, exploring the island and seeing what you can find there. And for that sort of thing, then really there doesn't need to be that many checks and balances, because basically you're doing it on your own for yourself. What you are doing is not materially affecting anybody else's experience. You're using the product for you how you want, and that's fine. And then you kind of get up to kind of event where you want a bit more credibility, but not close it down or place so many burdens on the athletes that it would put people off. So the kind of tier one races do some basic checks. You've got to have a heart rate monitor as well, so that we can check the heart rate and power all synced up and that sort of thing. And then you kind of move on to a tier two type event where you'd want dual recording, and that's all natively built in, such that you can pair a trainer and a power meter and a heart rate monitor, and you have all these different sources of data, and you can start to analyze them in more detail. But that brings in a whole bunch of extra barriers, and less people will want to do those kind of events. But the people who do want to do it really, really care that it's a level playing field. So you're kind of constantly trading off. Do you want an open event where accuracy and precision maybe not so important as participation, through to these high level events where actually putting a bunch of people off and making them jump through lots of hoops is acceptable because of the trade-off you get around that credibility, ensuring that what you see and experience is legitimate athletic performance. But the key thing is that you can choose.
Yeah.
As a race organizer, as an event organizer, you can just pick what sort of event you want.
Yeah, you mentioned dual power meters. Like what? So you have the trainer itself producing power. You have your power meter, which may be in the crank or pedals or hub, some other device. You can have both of those displayed, but you've also incorporated other devices, which is kind of unique as well. What other devices have you incorporated in to the system that you can view on screen?
Yeah, so the whole idea of TrainingPeaks Virtual is that it's set up and built for committed athletes, for coaches, for people who take their training and racing seriously. And part of that is having lots of data. That's the way the world works these days. Yep. And as you say, that the ability to pair both a trainer and a power meter means that you get extra information that you can display on screen. So things like torque values and smoothness and effectiveness and left-right balance and all of those kind of things. And also additional sensors. So, for example, you could pair core body temperature sensors. You can pair muscle oxygen sensors. All this kind of extra information that helps you train, helps you understand your own physiology, helps you understand what limits you can push to get the best out of your performance.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. We've talked a lot about what indieVelo, but TrainingPeaks Virtual brings to our existing TrainingPeaks platform. But Lee, how do we make TrainingPeaks Virtual better from everything we have traditionally at TrainingPeaks? The workouts, the structured workouts, syncing of data. How do you see that benefiting the virtual world?
Yeah, so I think in a number of ways. So again, this is early days in terms of how the platforms have been integrated together. But when George and we first started talking, it was about how do we continue to build that seamless experience. And so, again, when you're working with apps that don't necessarily communicate in a way that's designed to really fit together perfectly, there can be gaps sometimes. And so, these are not things that are insurmountable, but they add friction to the experience. And so things we have talked about and are working on actively are how do we make sure that our zones stay in sync between the two platforms, such that when someone is, entering their FTP and their threshold within TrainingPeaks, it is just carried over to TrainingPeaks Virtual. Same thing with weight, right? Like when you operate and ride in a virtual environment, to have that real simulation of experience, you need to have accurate weight within that. And so we currently have integrations with platforms such that body weight scale metrics are automatically brought to TrainingPeaks, and now those can directly flow into TrainingPeaks Virtual. So those are just some of the simpler ways. As we continue to develop the product and that experience, there are things that within workouts that we can start to do to start, again, bring more of the personality of the coach into the product, because we can have some, really nice integrations to be able to provide things like voice cues within that. So as you're doing that workout, we can think about how do we bring that coach's voice to the athlete in real time. So there's lots of things that we have the ability to explore and work upon. And that's part of what makes this exciting, is really how do we bring that coach and athlete together in this experience such that they can really benefit from how that continues to function. And George, I'm sure you have other thoughts too there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that what you just said around the seamless integration is the really important part of what we've thought through together. It's kind of how can we minimize the friction for the existing functions. But the thing that I think is really interesting is what we haven't thought of. Really listening to the community, really understanding what people want. As we've been talking about all along, that this software is built for those committed athletes and coaches, and listening to them and understanding what they want, that's the most important thing. So the ability to kind of develop this software really quickly, to iterate, try new things out, get ideas in, and build the software that people actually want to use, the things that will help them with their training and racing, but both indoors and outdoors. That's going to be the priority. And I don't presume to know what the answer is, but it's going to be fantastic finding out, listening to people, and then going and building it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've brought, you didn't have a workout builder, you didn't have a calendar, so kind of leaning on TrainingPeaks for those features, which seamlessly sync between the two. Will be, more and more advancements there yet to be seen, as you said, like listening to the customer base. One big request we've had, if you guys can cover off on in terms of the Apple TV.
Yes. So what was interesting is we kind of launched TrainingPeaks Virtual a couple of weeks ago, and almost immediately, shall we say, it became very apparent that the most requested feature was Apple TV. So in the spirit that we were talking about, of kind of responding to customers and what people want, and what these committed athletes and coaches really want for their training and racing, the answer was very clearly Apple TV. So we sat down, we said, okay, well, we had this plan, we had this roadmap for what we were going to do for the next month or so. Right, let's just put that to the side for now. Let's do Apple TV. So yeah, literally within 2 weeks, completely pivoted and released it today. So it's a really great example of us being able to listen to what people want and then going and delivering on that.
Yeah, super exciting. Anything else you guys want to hit upon? There's so much to offer that people can explore. I mean, every time I do it, I have another question, and it's like, oh yeah, it's in there. Oh yeah, that's in there. I'm like, literally, I'm just like discovering things every single time I use it. I personally love the pace groups. You have 24/7 pace groups. There's bots in there, so maybe a little explanation of what these bots are. But I love joining a pace group and doing my efforts off the front of a pace group. And then as I ease off on my interval, they catch me, I recover, I go back off the front. I didn't know there's a lap button. There is. There's a shortcut key for that, creating a lap on the fly, which I learned this week. So yeah, a little explanation on the bots that are in the platform.
Yeah, so TrainingPeaks Virtual has this population of 10,000 bots, and they're all individual. So they've all got their own name and they've all got their own country, but more importantly, they've all got their own height, they've all got their own weight, they've all got their own FTP, they've all got their own CP curve, they've all got their own W prime, they've all got their own kind of basic phenotypes and strategies. So there are some that are sprinters, there are some that are time trialers, there are some that are wheel suckers. Watch out for them.
Personalities.
Exactly. And they kind of all got these different strategies and tactics. And they log in and log out. They do exactly as humans do. So they all sit in their own little private area, and every now and again they'll come and join the island and go do a workout, or they'll go join a race. And there's this population of bots that means that there's always somebody there for you to train and race with of your ability. And that manifests itself in multiple ways. One, as you've just said, Dirk, there's these pace groups that are going around constantly. And if you want at 2:00 in the morning when nobody else is riding, there'll be a group of riders that you can join. And you can do your workout with them. Or if there's a race, we're used to this idea of having to wait for other humans to create a decent race. But now we've got this population of bots. If at 2 a.m. you want to have a race with 100 other people that are roughly your ability and have a really challenging, stretching workout, then you can. And you've got a group of riders who will push you to your limits at any time of the day over any course you want. And it's that adaptability, that benefit that it gives to your training, that's the real benefit here of having those bots.
Yeah, I just actually realized the opposite is true. You can find others of your same ability to ride with. But let's say a coach creates a group ride and there's all kinds of abilities within, the athletes they're coaching. Isn't it called a rubber band effect or something, where you can kind of artificially keep the group together?
Yeah, the kind of the term rubber band, actually, I think it must have originated decades ago from computer gaming, things like Mario Kart or what have you. If you're playing Mario Kart and you shoot off the front, you get pulled back. Or if you shoot off the back, then you get pulled forward. And that same principle applies to TrainingPeaks Virtual as well. So if you're doing a group ride or a group workout, very specifically a non-competitive thing, then there's this kind of force field that applies around the central peloton, which means that people can ride off the front and they will feel a force that's pulling them back, which means they get a much harder workout, because not only do they have to kind of ride against the wind and all the usual stuff that's providing the resistance for you, you've also got this rubber band force pulling you back. But equally the other end as well. The weaker riders get a tug forwards towards the center of the group. So that means you can have a group of riders where maybe the lead riders are doing 250 watts or something, and the trailing riders are only doing 150 watts. Nearly a factor of 2 between the front and back, but they all stay together in a little group. And then the kind of the ride leader has ride control, so they can adjust the strength of the rubber band as they go. So maybe you get to the bottom of a hill and you release the rubber band and set its strength to 0, and everybody races up the hill at their own speed. But when you get to the top, you the coach is going to say, okay, well, let's group everybody together, set the rubber band up to maximum strength, and everybody comes back together and rides together as a social group again.
Smart stuff. Cool stuff. Lee, any final thoughts here?
No, I'm so thrilled, George, to have you on our team. As I said, it's been wonderful just getting to know you at the outset, and every day it just further reinforces how excited I am about being on this journey with both of you, really. And I'm so excited what this means for our customers and how we can continue to bring more people into the world of endurance sport and healthy lifestyle. So I think this is just such a wonderful bringing together of two organizations, two entities, two sets of people together. So yeah, just thank you.
Yeah, and definitely from my side as well, this idea of values and mission and purpose being at the absolute core of everything that we do, that alignment where we're all pulling in the same direction, we all want the same thing, we're all building software for our athletes, for our coaches, and that guiding light just means that we're both completely aligned on everything, and that's a fantastic thing to be part of as well.
Hear, hear. Super cool. I also have to welcome another George founder to TrainingPeaks because my father, co-founder Joe Friel, his real name is George, and my other co-founder Gear Fisher, his first name is George. So you made the cut. Just because of that.
That's amazing.
Thanks, guys. Super cool. Look for a lot more developments along the way and stay in touch. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the TrainingPeaks Coachcast. Visit trainingpeaks.com for more training and coaching resources.